After e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop e5, we're playing Rossolimo, and after d6, we take the knight. Pawn takes back, and now, as we all know, e5. Now, in this video, we're going to go through the stuff we haven't seen so far, so we can close this saga forever. Let's start with some lines that we've done already. After bishop g4, we play d3, and here's a move we haven't seen at all. So pawn takes back. It looks like a free pawn. We can't take this pawn because the knight is pinned. So we have to attack this bishop, and when the bishop moves, we can attack it again, and then the pawn will be free. So let's look at this variation. Bishop takes, queen takes. Now black is at the pawn, but at the cost of this weakness. Now the move we have never seen before is the following. This is the novelty. Queen d5. Obviously, we're not going to take the queen because otherwise we're a pawn down, and black has got a completely fine pawn structure in perfect center. What to do now? Queen to g3. So let's look at two options here. One of them is to develop the bishop from the normal diagonal, the other one from the fianchetto. Let's start, for example, e6. Looks like a normal move. Okay, knight c3, attack the queen. And now you're going to see how we're going to clamp on the weakness in c5. We're going to take that pawn no matter what. Queen moves, queen to d4 to stay relevant. Bishop to e3, attacking the queen. Queen to b4, attacking the pawn. We don't care and we just castle. This variation is about to get really crazy. Rook to b8, threatening queen to b2. a3 is the best move for white. We don't care about the queen. Well, the thing is, the queen will have to move away, right? And now we've got a fantastic development. And you'll see later on how to take such a scenario from there. What happens when the queen takes the pawn? You think you probably cannot harm the black player. King moves. And now let's make an example. Black plays this move. c4, right, to kind of undermine the center, smash everything. Obviously, you play rook b1, and you're going to win the rook for free, so that doesn't work. So black will have to do something about that immediate threat. So that will be queen to b6, so that the queen, in case we attack the queen can move away and still defend the rook. So we're not going to do that now. We're going to play queen takes pawn in e5. So as I said, this was going to happen no matter what, and black is not going to get a pawn advantage forever. He's actually just going to keep this weakness forever. Now, a move like knight f6 now, just to make an example. Now that we have an attack on this rook, rook b1 wins the game immediately. The queen will have to move, and then we're going to win the rook, and it's going to be a disaster. So it's completely over. So now our opponent will have to do something about it. Queen to d8 seems to be doing the job. However, rook to b1 comes anyway, and black can resign. There's nothing to do here. If black tries to counterattack, let's say bishop d6, you just take the pawn in g7, and you're winning so much. If instead black, I don't know, plays anything with the rook, we're going to infiltrate. Let's say, for instance, well, if rook takes, then you're going to take back with the rook. And then you're threatening to go to b8, and it's impossible to stop. So what if rook to b6? This seems like a normal move. Well, knight a4, you just attack it again. The opponent will be forced to swap. Rook to b5, trying to stay, trying not to be completely demolished. Well, c4. And now it's impossible to avoid the trade. And then when the trade finally happens, now you're going to be threatening rook b8. And look at the black king. He can never castle. So back in this position after queen g3, what if black, instead of e6, rather tries to develop from the fianchetto g6? Okay, still, knight attacks the queen moves away. Knight e4 attacks the queen again. Queen moves again to still protect the pawn in c5. c4 comes now. And our opponent will have to finally just leave us alone. Queen to d4 maybe? Fine, give up the other pawn. Bishop e3, we got huge development. Queen takes in b2, castle. Okay, development. Bishop to g7. And now queen to f3. And now here's the threat. We're threatening the pawn in c6. So let's make an example. If knight to f6 comes, you're completely winning. You take the knight, then you're going to take the pawn in c6 with check. It's an absolute disaster. Position evaluated +7, +8, something like that. I forgot. Okay, so instead of knight f6, what about black plays queen to b7? Okay, well, rook a to b1, continuing development. Queen to c7, obviously saving the queen. Knight takes in c5, recapturing the pawn. We're still on a pawn. Knight f6. Now it looks like black is one step away from castling. This is going to be a normal game. But you're just going to play rook b7. And now there's no coming back. What to do? What if, I don't know, the queen could just move? Well, the queen will have to defend the pawn. If the queen doesn't, then queen to c6 check. And we're going for checkmate, literally. What about queen to d8? Okay, well, check. It looks like black might survive. King f8. And now you just take this pawn. If the queen takes, you're going to attack on this rook. And it's a disaster. Although that's kind of the only thing left to do. because you're threatening queen b7, and well, we're gonna take the game from there. You see some scenario. What about, let's make an example. Looks like, okay, take, maybe black is not completely lost. So let's see, for example, rook c8 attacking the queen. Queen to b7. So that was it. Queen taking the rook, we take the rook. Queen blocks. What exactly do we have here? We don't really have this check, which looked really good. We just go back to c7. And we are winning for the simple reason that black can't develop this rook in any way. We're going to play rook b1, rook b8. And that's it. And our opponent can't even ask for a swap. Queen d7 will be taken. Queen e7. Queen e7, just give a check once again. Queen blocks. But now you can take this pawn. And later when you move the knight, let's say, and then you can attack the king with the bishop, and nothing stops you from playing rook b1, position evaluated +5. So in this position, after rook b7, what if instead of queen d8, the queen goes to d6 and stops us from winning the pawn in c6, as we were mentioning before? Knight to a6 comes now. Now you're threatening knight c7, right? Okay, castle. Is black actually safe? No. Bishop to c5 attacks the queen. The queen will have to move. Queen e7. You're just taking e7, attacking the queen. Queen f5. You take. You got an attack on this pawn, and the position is completely winning for the white player. So let's make a very quick mention of the last positions, and then we can close this saga. So take, e5. Let's look at the variations with. So let's look at this one, right? d5 now. We have seen a lot of this. We've seen so much. We're gonna play d3, and now the novelty will be a5. We've never seen this move before. This is because the black player wants to develop the bishop from the edge. Okay, carry on. Bishop e3, e6 to defend the pawn and develop. Castle, bishop a6. You play rook e1, get it out of the way. c4 by black, which was the whole point, right? Now we take, strangely enough, because then the bishop takes back. You play knight d2 with an attack on the bishop. Bishop back to a6. c4. We totally don't care. Now, obviously, if bishop takes and take, then you're going to recapture the pawns, and black will have a weak pawn in c6 and a very weak king. What if bishop b4 pinning the knight? This seems to be making sense. Now you take this pawn, and when the pawn takes back, a3, simply attack the bishop, asking a question. What is our opponent going to do? If bishop e7 comes all the way back, we take the knight to d4. The knight is threatening to go to amazing squares. Rook to c8, stopping that from happening. Too late. Check. Queen a4. If, let's say, okay, if queen to d7, you just take this pawn in a5. This is completely winning position. You've got two passed pawns on the queen side, and you'll take it from there. If instead the king moves, the queen is still defending the pawn in a5. However, b4, and the pawn is pinned. We're going to be taking the bishop, so that cannot be taken. Bishop c4, saving the bishop. b5. This is how you play this. Bishop to c5, stopping the advance of the pawn. Knight to c6, and that was it. That was all that we were threatening all along. The knight to go to c6, queen to b6. These are all best moves. Now there's a double attack on the bishop and more defense and stopping the pawn from advancing. However, you're gonna take pawn takes back, check. Queen takes back, rook e to c1, finalizing the attack on the pawn in c4. Finally, knight to e7 to get rid of the knight. But you just take here now. You're gonna take the game from here. This is a completely winning position. And here in this position, after attacking the bishop, what if the bishop doesn't go to e7, but rather takes our knight? Okay, take back with the queen. And now development, knight e7, bishop to c5, castle, add knight to d4. Recognize the patterns. Rook to e8, to unpin the knight, obviously, so that the knight can play. Well, now that happened, just take. Queen takes back, and now we take this pawn. It was unstoppable. If the queen had taken, if the rook had taken in e7, then knight c6 would be a fork. So the queen had to take here, and now we can take this pawn. It's not poisoned, nothing to worry. Bishop e7 by black with an attack on the queen. Queen back to d2, and we're gonna win because of the two passed pawns. Rook a to c8, development. Okay, play h3, little moves. If rook to c7, just to make an example, right? Knight b5 and then sit in d6 is completely winning. If black plays, I don't know, rook to c4, you just attack it again with b3. The rook will have to move again, and then you can still do the same thing. If instead black plays rook to c5, well, b4, rook to c4, and now the knight goes to b5. So these moves are going to happen anyway. Rook e to c8. Obviously, you will be wondering, why did the rook try so hard to move? Well, because of doubling up and try to reach c2. It seems to be making sense. Knight to d6. Making a fork. Now, obviously, rook c2 has to happen. But you don't care because you can take in c8. So you see how powerful the knight in d6 was. Obviously, I'm aware that the game could have gone a completely different way, but that means your opponent will make mistakes. These are the best moves in the faulty variations. So here, in this position, one last thing after attacking the bishop. What if the bishop just goes back to f8? Okay, same tactic. Queen a4 check. Queen blocks. Let's look at this. Queen takes. Knight to e7, develop. Rook e to c1. Knight c6, attacking the queen. Queen b6, staying around here. Obviously, the rook can't move because then the bishop will be lost. So, bishop to b7, b4. This is how you play this. Invest everything on those 2 pawns. Rook a6. Okay, fine. Queen b5. Bishop e7, developing. It looks like black's develop is not bad at all. However, knight to b3 now, threatening to conquer glory. Castle, you played knight to a5. Obviously, the knight to c6 is pinned, can't take. Rook to b8, bring the knight here. Knight to d4, put more pressure on that knight. Bishop to c8. There's an attack on the queen, there's more defense over the knight. What's going on here? You take this knight. Completely crazy. When you lose the queen, you take this one with check. And now the king can't move, obviously, because then... And now when the queen takes the knight, rook c8 wins the game, obviously, as you can tell. But in this position, what if king moves? Now you can't really play rook c8 because then the king takes the knight in e7 and then you're down a queen. I mean, okay, well, you have to take the bishop with the knight. And now you're no longer attacking the knight in b5, the rook in b5 because the rook will move away. What's going on here? b5, position elevated +5. We have 2 knights and a bishop for a queen, but we have 2 strong pass pawns that are really deadly. So from the start, let's make a mention of something that was never said before. So bishop b5, d6, take, e5 and d5, d3, and now bishop g4. We have seen this move extensively. However, let's look at the novelty. So after knight d2, as we know, and e6, h3. Now, in the past, we went through a little bit of everything. Bishop h5 and bishop take as well, and then knight to e7. Knight to e7 needs to be seen, but in this variation, bishop h5. As we know now, we play queen e2, and now knight to e7. So the black player is not giving up the bishop for the knight. What to do now? Okay, a4, you'll see why in a second. Bishop to g6, because if you want to play knight g6, then g4 will trap the bishop. And then knight to f5, g4 will win a piece. So obviously bishop g6 had to happen, right? In this case, our opponent is basically retaining all of the pieces and preserving the possibility to play knight f5. This is the setup that we've never seen before. It's not good though, just, but we need to mention it in order to complete the saga so we know how to batter this Rossolimo all the time. Knight to f5, you play knight to b3, and you put in pressure on the square c5, which is the whole point. Remember, the d4 can never happen. If you wonder why, go and watch all the other videos so you understand. Rook to b8, now bishop to g5, attacking the queen. The queen will have to move. But nothing good is going to happen now. Let's make an example. So either the bishop blocks or the queen moves. If the queen moves, g4, the knight will have to move. 2 squares are available, either d4 or e7. h6, the knight wouldn't be doing anything. He wouldn't be attacking anything for the rest of the game. So let's start with knight e7, for example. You play a5, attacks the queen. The queen will have to move. If the queen tries to stay around here, to keep defending the pawn in c5 because it was being attacked, knight f to d2, and you'll see the plan in a second. h6 attacking the bishop, bishop e3. And now the knight, see, the thing is that there's double attack here. If you get to take this pawn, we're an easy street. Knight to c8, but now f4 with the idea of playing f5. This is a fantastic position because our opponent will have nowhere safe to castle because f5 is unstoppable. And you can take the game from there. You have an idea of playing e6. We've seen similar patterns in the past, so let's go back a few moves. Now here, after g4 attacking the knight, what if the knight goes to d4? Fine, take it with this knight, obviously, the f knight, so you can push f4. And now f4. So what about h6, counter-attacking? Here you simply attack the queen. When the queen moves away, we're going to be recapturing this pawn. Not now, because we have to save the bishop. Bishop to h4. And we're going to be playing f5, and that simply wins the game. Simple as that. What if bishop e7? Fine, just take. Take back, and now f5. We can take the game from here. This is position evaluated +3 for a reason. So in this position, by the way, after bishop e7, what if the bishop g5? What if bishop plays to e7 and black doesn't move the rook? Okay, just take. Queen takes back, and now queen to d2. Let's see what the plan is. If black, for example, castle, you play queen to c3, and you're capturing that pawn. There's nothing for black. There's absolutely nothing. We've seen similar position before, so let's not look at it now. What if black plays c4 now? Okay, take. And now knight to a5 comes. Double attack on these 2 pawns. So losing the pawn was inevitable. Rook takes in b2 is wrong because of knight c4. You're not just attacking the rook. You're threatening g4. The knight will have to move, and then the square d6 is accessible for the knight. I can't move arrows. I have to do it. I have to just say the moves because I've got a touchpad. So back in this position, what if black plays the best move, queen to b4, looking for a trade, attacking the knight? Well, we have to accept that trade, as you can tell. Rook takes back, and now c3 attacks the rook. Rook will have to move. If rook b2, rook f2b1 wins the game, because now we're going to be doing a skewer and winning. If take, yes, our opponent can castle now, but how long do you think it's going to take us to win this pawn and this pawn and then this pawn? They're all so bad, and black bishop, it's just not playing. The knight is, the knight might come into play, but can't move here, can't move anywhere else. So it's a very ugly position, and white is completely winning. So in this position, for example, what if the rook goes to b6? Well, okay, just take here, right? We've got 3 pawns against 2. And also there's an attack on the rook, so black still cannot castle, right? And you've got this idea, if the rook just moves away, right? You've got this idea of attacking that knight. When the knight moves, you've got knight d6, the opponent will lose the right to castle. And then you can keep pushing these pawns. One last mention before closing this video. This is, we're actually not going through this line, but it has to be mentioned. So basically after e5, black can choose to play bishop f5 straight away. Now this move is just positionally wrong, completely wrong. So let's just mention why. Here's the thing. You castle, you play on the same moves. Rook to b8, developing the rook, putting pressure on this pawn in b2. d3, the usual moves. And now, what needs to be understood is that this bishop, whatever it moves, it will be a transposition into one of the lines already seen, except the fact that black lost the tempo. The bishop in f5 has no purpose, and it's going to be attacked by the knight in h4. So let's make an example. Obviously e5 cannot happen, e6 cannot happen because you can take the pawn in d6. If d5 to make that move afterwards, then just attack the bishop straight away. When the bishop moves, there are the similar patterns, right? Now you can just play e6, position evaluated already +2, and you know why. Let's say black develops, the only thing left to do, you take the bishop, pawn takes back, and now rook to e1. And here's the thing, black can never take this pawn in e6, because then the black bishop will never play it, ever. So, well, okay, we have mentioned already these type of plans, this type of setups, so let's go back. You know that that's what's going to happen. So after d3, let's look at this move, g6, to try and develop from the fianchetto. Okay, rook e1, bishop g7, knight d2, usual stuff, d5 now, h3. Okay, black develops to h6, because there's nowhere else to play the knight. Knight b3, and after queen to b6 to defend the pawn in c5. Obviously, remember, black can really push c4, and you know why. Bishop e3 puts double attack on that pawn, and this now can only be stopped with d4. Bishop to f4. Now we're threatening e6 with the discovered attack on the rook, and obviously e6 by black is not possible because g4 traps the bishop. So what about bishop e6? See, these moves are forced. Queen to c1. Double attack on the knight in h6. Best move, bishop takes, pawn takes back. Now the knight can go to f5, but still g4 still traps it. And this, even if the black bishop had stayed in e6 and that capture hadn't occurred, you could have still done it.